Mele Kalikimaka, everyone. It is the night of Thanksgiving, so Christmas time is here, as they say. The Nikkor H Auto f2 50mm lens from 1965, according to the serial number on the front, made in Japan in a clean room laboratory, is the sharpest lens Nikon ever made, or at least up there in the running. This lens also has beautiful color, though it has sort of a bluish tint to it thanks to its Spartan one if any coating on the front element. It sort of makes it look like you're seeing the world through sapphire tinted glasses. Couple details about it. It has 6 elements in 4 groups. It has a close focus that is a little bit better than half-life size. And it has the ubiquitous 52mm filter size on the front, so very adaptable on the front end. It also only weighs 200 grams. I also love the styling of it with the scalloped focusing ring. You can't really beat that. Another lens that does have a scalp focusing ring is a much faster 1972 50mm f1.4, weighs a whopping 250 grams. This honkin' thing can practically see in the dark at the 1.4, wide open that is. It is not as sharp as the f2 or even the f1.8. So if you don't care about sharpness, you want to see in the dark, get yourself the 1.4. It also has much more accurate color than the f2, though still with that vintage feel. I mean, what else are you going to get in 1972 but vintage? Now moving on to a lens with beautiful sharpness, though not as good as the f2. Much better color reproduction, almost perfect you might say. This is sort of the jack of all trades, master of none, though oftentimes better than master of one lens of the Nikon lineup. This is the 50mm f1.8 from 1981, this particular one. And it only weighs 170 grams. So even lighter than the f2, faster than the f2, not as sharp as the f2, but better color than the f2. So you might want to go for this lens, though I actually prefer the f2. But before we finish with the f2, let's look at the Pancake 1.8 right here. This lens, I did a review right there of it. You can check it out. But this lens gets its pancake nickname from its side profile. Only weighs 135 grams, if you can believe it, and it is a pleasure to use. Practically feels like you don't have anything on your camera. People aren't really intimidated by it. It just kind of looks like a toy. Though it does have sharpness issues, not as sharp as any of these other lenses. Maybe the 1.4 might be a little bit less sharp in this lens, but beautiful color nonetheless, and the easiest focus ring I've ever encountered. It is the one thing I wish that this lens had, was the focus ring from the Pancake 1.8 with that scallop design. One more thing before we move on to the review. Let me tell you the story of how I got a hold of this lens. I bought it offline from a retired GM engineer who through the 1980s worked in their crash test dummy department. He was on the cutting edge of car safety. Certainly saved a lot of lives, so without question there are huge shoes to fill with me being the second owner of this lens and camera. I really hope I did it justice by taking pictures as beautiful as I could take in and of the Motor City. This has been Ryan Ellis. If you like the content that I make, consider supporting me on Patreon, patreon.com/cdetroit like I do. Now that we've looked at this lens, let's see what sort of pictures it takes. Hello, this is Ryan Ellis, and this is a lens review of the Nikon Nikkor H 50mm f2 on the Nikon F-mount from 1965, only 6 years after the Nikon F-mount itself was invented, so quite an early F-mount apparatus, what have you. Here's some details. You can feel free to pause and read those. This corresponds with my 134th and 3/4 Detroit street photography session. Later on will be my 135th, both taken with the same lens. My good friend, Mr. Roy R. Rollins, right here. There he is. Look at the camera. He is my subject on this entire first day, most of the next day. He is an international man of mystery. Bam, check him out right there. I did a 7-part or so series on his life story. He is quite the fascinating gent. Actually, behind him, this automotive-themed sculpture was done by a man named Sestak, is his last name, I believe. Check him out right here. He paints and also does sculpting. I think those are quite, in my opinion, different disciplines. Here, Roy and I are biking down, or up, whichever way you look at it, Gratiot Avenue, originally with a dirt toll road about 100 or so years ago. And now you can drive on it for free. In fact, I don't think there are any toll roads in all of Michigan. I don't get why those exist. But let's talk about the lens. It is considered by none other than Ken Rockwell himself to be maybe Nikon's sharpest lens in the F-mount ever. Them's fighting words, perhaps, for some. And he calls other lenses the sharpest Nikon ever made. But, you know, I can't really argue with him. I own quite a few Nikon lenses, I have to say, and you can check out, that's the link right there. I don't know if I own a lens that's sharper. Here's a close focus. I'm really drinking his morning espresso at Urban Bean Co., my favorite cafe in all of Detroit. There's my hand. I'm one of those hand talkers. I'm actually gesticulating right now as I narrate over this slideshow. The close focus, you can see just the beautiful sharpness of this lens. I did a review right here of the Pancake lens by Nikon, the 50mm Pancake. Much easier focusing ring, just a little flick, as opposed to the 50 f2 from 1965. It's a little stiff. It's not the stiffest. You know, the stiffest was probably my 55 1.2, super duper stiff focusing ring. Maybe it should be that way because, you know, 1.2, but at f2, you've got a little bit more wiggle room than even 1.8. If I could make one change to this lens, I wish the focusing ring was a lot easier to move. And I'm not about to put oil in what was made in a laboratory clean room. It was made to such beautiful tolerances to work as well as it does. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I certainly don't consider the, to my feel, stiffness of the focusing ring to be that big of an issue. I think I already said other people find it quite easy. Here we are, a second day. It's a little bit warm, the white balance, on accident. Toward the end of the day, I actually caught the error and switched it back. But for now, it's a little bit on the warm side, but still, this is a good time to talk about the color. Not the sharpness, since I'm shooting through a window right now and the sharpness is affected just in this little time lapse right here, but the color is vibrant on this lens. You can see that red door back there. I only took a single shot of it. Here we are now headed to my favorite art gallery in Detroit, David Klein Gallery. Kenny Scharf, friend of Basquiat and Warhol, on display, kind of an ethereal sort of mind. There he is reinventing plaid with almost Jackson Pollock or otherwise inspired drizzling of paint. And he has weird mystical sort of woodland creature, almost medieval inspired anthropomorphized figures in his artwork. Very out of this world. Took a portrait of a young man just outside as I was leaving the gallery. And that's something I try to do as often as possible. When asked, what do you like to take pictures of? I describe pareidolia, how you want to see the human form in everything. You see the human form in a piece of toast or a man on the moon. Now, from inspiration to inspiration, I mentioned him before and I'll mention him again because I really think we should know more about this man outside of the city. Bill Rauhauser. Bam, the Dean of Detroit Photography. One thing he said, have a little idea what's going on in the world so that when you're out there taking pictures, you know what's important. A lot of talk is being done here in America and around the world of border walls. I couldn't help but see these American flags and no trespassing, keep out. And I'm like, you know, that's almost symbology to what's discussed right now. No comment either way with border fences. I certainly have my strong opinions. It evokes that feeling, that thought. And when you can get a picture to do that, you're succeeding. Seek after that. Speaking of great artists, Kenny Scharf, who I just showed you, was exhibiting at my favorite art gallery in Detroit, David Klein. Another art gallery, wonderful art gallery. I don't know what MoCAD stands for. I think it stands for something modern, but Kenny Scharf did a spray paint piece in his aesthetic on one of the walls. Even though he's not showing anymore at David Klein, you can still see him there on, I would assume, pretty permanent display. Here I am headed back down Woodward, just seeing what sort of seasonal interesting things I might catch. It's almost Thanksgiving as I'm recording this. This is actually the weekend right before Halloween that this particular slideshow occurs. Different seasons, different holidays, you'll catch little flair here and there, tchotchkes, you might say. A lesson I'm trying to learn, a lesson I would love to impart to any budding photographers, even experienced photographers, because like I said, I'm pretty experienced. This is my 135th week doing this, and something I'm still learning is stop and be patient. Plant your feet in the ground. Don't move and wait till that shot arrives. And here I was taking the same composition again and again until every single bulb lit. I think they might be set to not always all light up at the same time. That's kind of the idea. It doesn't twinkle otherwise. I stood there and I took the same shot over and over again so that when I got home, I could choose hopefully the best of the best, but it can go either way sometimes. Sometimes you don't know how good of a shot you got until you actually get home. I actually consider that quite a discipline if you can avoid looking at the back of the camera, checking the image again and again, because you got to keep your eyes open to the world around you. So speaking of, I see this young man in punk rocker apparel, listening to his headphones. The guy likes music. That's what I figured. I know right by where he was walking, because he wasn't standing there when I saw him. He was walking across Hart Plaza. I said, hey, do you like music? And he's like, yeah. Kind of a random question, but I'm okay with being random. I said, well, if you stand over there in the middle of that circle and shout, you'll hear your voice all around you like Dolby surround sound. Go try it out. And he's like, okay, what does he have to lose? Either I'm crazy or he's gonna hear something pretty cool. And sure enough, because I know that for a fact, because this past summer I was walking by and this Vietnam vet told me this, and so I've been using it to take pictures ever since. And that's, I guess, what I'm gonna pass on to you. I asked, I said, hey, while you're standing there, you mind if I take a picture? Because it's kind of a scenic spot and it's cleared away. The leading lines from every direction point toward him on the ground. And if it's dark out, there are Christmas lights on all the trees. Many wonderful ways you can use this one spot. This sort of I'm using as an analog for other situations. Invent it in your own way, in your own town or your own time. I use this opportunity to take a picture of him. I commend that to you as well. Either have a spiel or do as I do. I kind of make it up on the spot. It's more fun that way for me. Here's close up, close focus of the Penobscot, a little detail on the Penobscot building. One of the many buildings done by, you might call him, Detroit's architect, Albert Kahn, through the 1920s, and I think maybe before and after that period, did many wonderful buildings in Detroit, including my favorite, the Guardian building, which I would love to take more pictures of. Here are some video clips of, again, the close focus. I just wanted to see how good does this lens look? What is this lens capable of? Just so you can see as well. If you're watching this video because you're considering possibly buying this lens, I hope that this is steering you in one direction or the other. Certainly not kind of leaving you on the fence nonetheless. There's one of those electric scooters, kind of a new thing that just happened this year in 2018. And they're all over. Even on a rainy day, they still work. I can't wait till it snows in Detroit. I'm really curious to see if they stay during the snow or if they find some other way to use them. The Detroit Experience Factory has wonderful tours, which you'll see right about Binga Banga Booma. I thought my timing would be better, but this is the Hudson site, going to be the tallest building in Detroit. I always go back to it because it's going to be quite the opposite of a hole in the ground in 3 years from now. Another thing I do for remedial help, just to know about the city, a lot of the stuff I use to take pictures, as far as, oh, that's important, come from, I'll hop on these free tours. Leave them $1 at the end if they accept tips. They tell you about what's around you. If you're polite about it, even take pictures while the tour is going on too. Here we come to the end of the video. This particular week was the week before Halloween, so you have all the people dressed up in their Halloween attire, apparel, costumes. If you would like, support me, patreon.com/cdetroit like I do. Thank you to Mr. JM for supporting me. He is the best. I could say a lot more, but simply put, I have a Tumblr, which you can find right about here, which is ryanellis.photo.tumblr.com. So many dots and so little time. Check it out when you can. I also have a Twitter and Instagram and probably some other stuff too, but I hope that if you were deciding whether or not to buy this lens, that you've made your decision on the basis of this video. This has been Ryan Ellis. Thank you for watching. Have a nice day. Au revoir.